जहां न हो कोई दूसरा, वहां आप से वसल था, वहां आप से था जुदा। वजुज़ इसके और कहूँ मैं क्या, कि नूर नूर से जा मिला, कि नूर नूर से जा मिला। बलगल्लुला बिकमालिही, बलगल्लुला बिकमालिही।
Reflections with Sheikh Rizwan Muhammad. I'm your host Zubair Akram. 11th day of Ramadan, Radio Ramadan 87.7. Reflections. This is our episode number 7. 11th of Ramadan. Iftar is going to be 8:03, and I'm asking Faisal to play the first segment of this program, Surah Alaq. It's English translation, and inshallah we'll go on to the commentary with Sheikh Rizwan Muhammad after this.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful.
اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق.
Recite in the name of your Lord who created.
خلق الإنسان من علق.
Created man from a clinging substance.
اقرأ وربك الأكرم.
Recite, and your Lord is the most generous.
الذي علم بالقلم.
Who taught by the pen.
علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم.
Taught man that which he knew not.
كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى.
No, but indeed man transgresses.
أن رآه استغنى.
Because he sees himself self-sufficient.
إن إلى ربك الرجعى.
Indeed, to your Lord is the return.
أرأيت الذي ينهى.
Have you seen the one who forbids?
عبدا إذا صلى.
A servant when he prays.
أرأيت إن كان على الهدى.
Have you seen if he is upon guidance?
أو أمر بالتقوى.
Or enjoins righteousness?
أرأيت إن كذب وتولى.
Have you seen if he denies and turns away?
ألم يعلم بأن الله يرى.
Does he not know that Allah sees?
كلا لئن لم ينته لنسفعا بالناصية.
No. If he does not desist, we will surely drag him by the forelock.
ناصية كاذبة خاطئة.
A lying, sinning forelock.
فليدع ناديه.
Then let him call his associates.
سندع الزبانية.
We will call the angels of hell.
كلا لا تطعه واسجد واقترب.
No, do not obey him, but prostrate and draw near to Allah.
बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। शुरू अल्लाह के नाम से जो बेइंतहा रहम करने वाला है। पढ़ो ए नबी सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम अपने रब के नाम के साथ, जिसने पैदा किया जमे हुए खून के एक लोथड़े से इंसान की तख्लीक की। पढ़ो, और तुम्हारा रब बड़ा करीम है, इसने कलम के ज़रिए से इल्म सिखाया, इंसान को वो इल्म दिया जिसे वो न जानता था। सदक़ल्लाहुल अज़ीम। अस्सलाम वालेकुम शेख।
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Sheikh, in this program Reflections, alhamdulillah, we've discussed quite a few concepts, I would say. And one of the biggest concepts that I have come across in this conversation is tadarruj. And from there, we have gone on to see how it is the basis of human life, Successful human life, tadarruj, graduation, grading, gradually approaching the goal. And we learn from this surah that this is how Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq leads on to the concept of graduation, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is asking his Prophet ﷺ to read. And he responds, I can't read, but he's commanded to read. And from there, the reading goes on to, it spans over 23 years, where he keeps reading the Mus'haf, or he keeps reading the Wahi, the Sahifa that he receives gradually through Angel Jibreel alayhi Today, I would like that if we can share with our listeners the focused meaning of the first, or the understanding of the first, maybe say 5 ayahs, if possible, within the time that we have. And starting with Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq khalaqal insana min alaq.
Yeah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So obviously, the way that I usually like to approach this is tadabbur, and so tadarruj and tadabbur are related. It's like kind of a gradual process. Like the Quran requires you to engage with it while knowing the Arabic language. It needs grammar, rhetoric. You need to be up to the level of attempting to come close to how the Prophet ﷺ's companions would have heard it and understood it. So the Arabic language is an extremely rich repository of meaning, of patterns, of images. And I was actually speaking to a friend a couple of days last night, I think. Yeah, it was last night actually. And he was saying that, people always talk about, he was always told about, told about Surah An-Najm, that it's an amazing chapter. And he in fact, what he said was, it's always amazed me and perplexed me in equal degree how everybody prostrated at the end of Surah An-Najm. What was it that they felt? And he said, I never felt it. Never, when I read it, and he knows Arabic, so he's not illiterate in the Arabic language in one way, but he said he never understood it. And then somebody told him to read Sayyid Qutb's Fi Dhilal al-Quran on that chapter, because one of the things of Sayyid Qutb, even though he's maligned in many ways, he has a mastery of unpacking the rhetorical imagery of the Quran, because he's got a separate book on the imagery of the Quran itself, not just the tafsir. He's got an actual book on the topic of the imagery of the Quran. And he said at that point, because he read it with another sheikh, and when he read Fi Dhilal al-Quran, he realized that it was images, a moving image that, it's unfolding in front of you, like the most immersive, these cinemas which have an immersive, what they call, like, I have no idea what they're called, but it's like 3D, but it's also immersive. So it's almost like you're there. And so is it like augmented reality, or, these kind of sets that they put in their heads that makes them feel that they're somewhere? The Quran is more immersive if you understand the Arabic language. So in English, unfortunately, what we have to then do is prod out the strands of meaning within the words themselves, the tapestry, and then try and bring that alive to people, so to be able to understand, at the end you can summarize it in 5 minutes, but you have to, like start to tease out all these strands that people will not focus on. And the meaning is clear at the end, but you need tadabbur. This is why the Quran, we read every Taraweeh, we have to listen to it. And when you read a verse, or you read the tafsir of it, you come back again, you still need to read it again, because it grows with meaning. It's a very strange thing. It's not growing with your experience. Like, for example, you're not who you were last year, so a verse might mean something different because you've more experience. There's also an aspect of the Quran which, in and of itself, regardless of who's looking at it, is growing. It is a constantly moving, evolving text, because this is one of the miracles of the Quran itself. It's just something, something I can ill explain, because it's so essential to the Quran, and nothing is like it. I mean, it's nothing. You can imagine a movie that you watch 2 times, 3 times, you might watch 5 times. You'll encompass it, and you might watch the director's cut. You might watch, deleted scenes. You'll get some aspect of, the fact there's some kind of depth, but not like the Quran, which just instills awe through its depth itself. So this is why when I kind of go through in the Ramadan shows that we do different chapters of the Quran, it's more for myself to tease out themes that are coming out of these words. And in this one, the idea of singularity we came up with at the beginning, right at the beginning, paralleled the revelation with creation, because that's like the two books of Allah. The creation informs us of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His majesty, that the signs of Allah are around us. These are also called ayat. And then the other signs are the revelation, al-ayat. Both of them start from singularity, from an inception point. And here it's iqra, and in the actual the creation theory we have is that it comes from a big bang, singularity. And so this is why, in this, when we were looking at these verses, I think the first two or so, we were starting to go through them. What came through was the connection of the two voices in Revelation. The two voices meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and He is the one who is speaking from pre-eternal speech which is before time, before space, before words, letters, coming in and being amplified through human speech in Arabic. And on the other hand, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, who is al-insan. And so you have the interface between Allah, the creator, and human being, and the best of them being our representative. It's almost like we've sent the Prophet ﷺ as our representative to speak to Allah, because he's the best of us. It's like if you wanted, one of the poets said, إِذَا كُنْتَ ذِي حَاجَةٍ مُرْسِلًا فَرْسِلْ حَكِيمًا وَلَا تُوصِهِ. If you ever need to do something and send somebody on your behalf, he said, send a wise person, and don't worry that you don't give them advice, because if they're wise, they'll be able to know what to do in the moment. And so Allah is almost like choosing the Prophet ﷺ to be a representative, to receive the revelation, knowing that he will give it out in the most perfect form, promulgate it, spread it, teach it, exemplify it as the most prophetic of figures. And he is al-insan, al-kamil. We kind of talked about it yesterday, that the Prophet ﷺ is the epitome of perfection of human form. And then, therefore, what we have is these verses. We were doing Iqra, Surah Iqra. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. The words that represent Allah are Rabb, for example. Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, al-khaliq. الذي خلق الإنسان من علق اقرأ وربك الأكرم. So these kind of verses are interspaced with descriptions of Allah, one of which is Ar-Rabb, which is something that nobody else can be. And this is like in theology, in Muslim theology, you have an amazing tapestry of how to explain theological issues. And in theology, we have this idea of attributes that nobody can have except Allah, which is negating attributes. So Allah is Ar-Rabb, and that's one of what they call the Sifat al-Salbiyah, which gives you one aspect of Allah which is unimaginable, unapproachable. And then also we have, Allama bil qalam, that he teaches, he's the one that teaches, he is the one that has knowledge. And that's also an attribute which is a positive attribute, which is one other aspect of the attributes of Allah. And you have al-Khaliq.
So in the first ayah, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq. So there are actually two names, two attributes, Rabb and Khaliq.
Yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
So one is the Lord that owns everything.
Yes, and then the other name is the effect of that, which is what in theology they call sifatul af'al, which are the things that Allah does, which we see.
So the first declares the ownership, right? Rabb.
Yes, ownership and many other things. Yes.
Rabb means the one who owns everything.
Owns, and then it is
manages.
I think when I just explained it, it also this idea of nourishes, because ownership implies things. You own land, you nourish it, you have full use of it, and an intelligent, intelligible, wise Malik and Rabb, an owner, will cultivate. Will
so in Islamic economics, this is a term called Rabbul Mal. So there is the owner of the mal. So there's, and then
Yeah, so the Rabb al-Mal means you can your onus is to invest it and to make it grow. And one of the things is that Allah is in this name, even though He's a Rabb, it has this tinge of helping people develop, grow, nourish, flourish. This idea comes out very clearly in Rabb, and then Allah says that He's al-Khaliq, He's the creator. But then these two names are two aspects, and then Allah also adds the name which I think is the most beautiful one here in the context of the Prophet ﷺ, which is Al-Karim. Allah is Al-Karim. That whatever happens after this moment of the inception, the singularity starting, you will find your Lord to be generous in His care, knowledge, protection, everything you can imagine, Kareem. And like in, this very famous verse in the Quran, Ar-Rahman ala al-Arsh istawa, which people argue, YouTubers argue about all the time because they've got nothing better to do in their lives.
Oh, yeah. Is He the throne or?
Yeah. So
the throne?
they miss the point. It's like,
where is He? Tell me, where is He?
Yes, it's stupidity. It's really stupid because Imam Malik had a person banished from his, majlis because of this stupid question. Missed because Imam Malik rahimahullah was what we call now a don. You know what a don is? Like you don't
mess with him.
Yeah, because you will be decimated in silence. You will be humbled to your knees. And what he was essentially, Imam Malik was essentially saying is, nadano, like you kind of, you have missed the point. Because the verse is all about, what's the verse about? It's about on the day of judgment, you're going to be judged. Now, Allah is telling us, okay, on that day, who will you find judging you? Because that's the whole point of the Arsh, is to establish authority and power and a dignified status to the one there, and the one owning it and the one having complete power over it. Now, if the judge is angry, or the judge is vengeful, and the judge is wrathful, and the judge is belligerent, for example, then who's going to remain in Islam? Because you will think, we've tried all this, and then we get to that moment in our destiny where we're in front of Allah being judged. Ar-Rahman ala al-Arsh istawa. It's the merciful. Like, if you've done your part as much as you could, then there's actually studies on this. I don't know where it was it Pakistan? Actually, we look this up because I read random stuff, as you know. And there was a study about the effect of fasting on judgments in law courts.
Okay.
And it showed, and unless I dreamt this last night, I used to have strange dreams after Fajr. But what inshallah came to me, which was studied, was that they thought that the judge who's fasting would be more grumpy and would therefore be more kind of dismissive of people, and then give them more more kind of absurd decisions and harsh decisions. What they found is that they were much more clement. They were much more understanding of situations. They provided alternative means of chastising people. Not just the insignificant statistical proportion. This was significant. I think 40% or something, don't quote me, but if you look into this or look into this whole issue, it's there. And that's the point. The person judging and their demeanor has an effect on how you're judged. And the whole purpose of that verse, and this is why Muslims, one of the things I've taught so many students, I mean, think of how many students, for our course iSyllabus, we've been through thousands of students. And, I always have all types of students, like people that are belligerent and insist that they have the right opinion. But slowly, alhamdulillah, I've had yet to, I think, probably thousands, like 7,000 students going through courses, had anybody who's remained belligerent and obstinate, and they've all turned after about 6 weeks when they realize that their literacy level is quite low, and that there's an alternative worldview that is informed by the great 14,000 years of our scholarly tradition. And it's to do with the fact that verse, for example, is all about giving people hope that Allah, on the day of judgment, if they do their part, and if they're lax and they fall short, that Allah will still judge with them in the sense with this quality of mercy, which is why Kareem, Iqra wa rabbuka al-akram, is not just Kareem, he is Akram, the most most generous of all. Then the Prophet is going to right away be in a state of tasalli. Like, don't worry what happens after this, because the Prophet is going to be going through a very difficult time right away after these five or so verses are revealed. He will be cut from revelation. But Allah is telling, look, remember I told you I was al-Akram, alladhi allama bil qalam, who taught through the pen. So this whole thing is interfaced between insan, the Prophet ﷺ, the perfect representation of humans, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And, I think the whole idea of insan is really important, because I've mentioned this before. It's really important to understand why Arabic uses certain terms. Al-insan in the first revelation is important because insan is packed with meaning. It's pregnant with implied meaning, and it indicates the Prophet is in seclusion. Remember, at this point in time, he's secluded himself from his family. But insan means a person who has uns. Uns is like this quality of social connectivity with other people. Humans are social animals, essentially, as Ibn Khaldun mentions, meaning that we thrive and survive and thrive, in fact, in the context of families and units and couples and children and this kind of uncles, and the whole process nourishes us psychologically, spiritually, intellectually. You see children really flourishing when they have a wide array of ages around them. And then also insan is, and the Prophet is being told that because you cannot remain in the Ghari Hira. Like that is a fall from perfection. Like,
Sorry.
do you understand? When Allah says insan, a fall from perfection. Now, Buddhism, for example, or monasticism would say perfection is to divest yourself of human qualities. Now, when Allah is saying, خَلَقَ الْإِنسَانَ مِنْ عَلَقٍ, human beings was created. Insan has this meaning pattern of uns, of by nature being in need of a social context. And that's like, this, the Naqshbandi Tariqah has very famous, kind of principle in their way of spirituality, which is al-khalwa fil jalwa. Jalwa is to be right at the front of everything.
Yeah. Like to remain with yourself while you're with everyone.
Yes, but Jalwa is like to be the front, like Sultan Mehmet al-Fatih, conquering Istanbul and having all these people, saying Allah, being right at the top of this wave. And in that moment of everybody just pouring praise on him, internally just being in a state of seclusion with Allah, just like not even noticing.
Al-khalwa fil jalwa. So the khalwa, yeah, okay.
Yeah, al-khalwa fil jalwa. You have to be, that's the perfection. Yeah. Whereas spirituality nowadays, the kind of is to go into seclusion and retreating, and it has a purpose. Like Ramadan, the last 10 days are all about seclusion. But the perfection is not that. It's required as a building block for perfection.
And so that's totally, this is totally opposite from where people who will be in a public discourse, they are criticized to be in public discourse because we are encouraged not to have too many friends. We are encouraged not to have too many connections, because more you have, more answerable you are on the day of judgment. And also the Sufi way of, or tasawwuf, or being closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, means that you are in form of muraqabah in your life. That you can talk to yourself and talk to your Lord more than you can talk to other people. So you're in tune with yourself, and that can only come with Hira. That can only come with i'tikaf.
Yes, that's what I said. End of Ramadan is building, but then it's a launching pad for perfection. It's not perfection. You cannot remain.
That's not the end.
Yes, you cannot remain in the state of i'tikaf. You cannot also, because you have to leave to celebrate. Eid al-Fitr, you cannot, like, it's makruh, tahriman according to most, to remain, it's like, it's beyond, it's not even, I've not even seen anybody conceive of the question, actually, now that I think of it, in fiqh, in the Maliki school or in the Hanafi school. In the Shafi'i school, I don't know, perhaps they might have a, because they have the 6 fasts simultaneously. Anyway, it's fiqh, I'm just going off. The point is that the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, which is very famous, mashhur, about the shade of Allah on the day there's no shade except the shade of Allah. There's 7 people mentioned in one of the Sahih narrations about that, and at the top of it is Al-Imam Al-Adil, the just ruler, the just leader. And you think about it, the shade of Allah is elite. This is elite of the elite of non-prophets. So this is not prophets. So we're talking about people who through their actions. So we're talking about Kasbi and Wahabi. This is the Kasbi arena where everybody, you, myself, everybody who's listening is in, which is, this is things we can do. The greatest thing to get into this, VIP suite, if you want to like make it really mundane, is khalwa fil jalwa, is that your adala, which is your justice in accordance with the time and your kind of role, is such that it is balanced and echoing the justice that Allah wants you to do, because your justice impinges and impacts everybody. And this is why Imam Ibn Taymiyyah, like he said, that 40 years of rule with an unjust leader is better than one day without a leader, because of bloodshed. Because the Imam is somebody, the leadership is something that is very, very difficult. It's a kind of, it's something that is, we think of it now as being something that is against people seek for their own privilege, but it's not. It's a very difficult state. But in some countries, it's there for its own purpose. It's for cronyism and all the rest of it. But generally, Al-Imam Al-Adil, to be in that powerful situation and then to be just, is very difficult. And so this is insan. The Prophet is being told, in a sense, you're a human being. And insan also means this quality of uns, nisyan, which is to forget. And the forgetfulness is an interesting aspect of human beings, which is the Prophet will be given this, and he will sometimes, in certain situations, in the initial period of his prophecy, have to be reminded of the magnanimity of Allah, that we are forgetful by nature. One of the qualities that prophets have is that they can be affected by normal human frailties like illness and forgetfulness and so on and so forth, but never to the point of sin. And so that's for the Prophet ﷺ. But for us, if you think about it, I say things and when somebody says, well, can you just repeat that? And I said, I have no idea what I said. Like, I can be teaching a class and I'll say, I'll give them an explanation. And, Sheikh, can you just explain it again? And I actually forget what I just said. Yeah. Like, that's how bad it gets. Forget, what I said yesterday to my wife or my kids, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. That's a different level of...
Yeah, okay.
There's a different level of nisyan. Like, we're just like it's like a sieve. You have these sieves. This is like everything. The only thing that remains is like things like Alfi ibn Malik, the kind of books on grammar that I've kind of memorized, but not kind of mundane. That was torturous, actually, memorizing that stuff. But the kind of so some stuff is stuck there and is not getting it, but the mundane stuff disappears. And it's actually research done. It was in Glasgow University, actually, about the reason why people get rid of or naturally are predisposed to getting rid of information through forgetfulness. It's to do with the fact that human beings focus on universal big things, important things. If your mind's clogged up with lots of detail, it's actually a barrier to surviving as a human. Like animal instincts, almost they were tying it back to evolution, but we know that that's the case, that humans shed small details that are not relevant because they want the universal idea. You have 1,000 experiences in life. They tell you the importance of family, for example. Okay, you forget the individual things until you're reminded of them, but family is important. And if you ask why,
Sheikh,
I don't know.
How would you translate that Khalwa fil jalwa. Seclusion.
Jalwa is yeah, khalwa fil jalwa. Khalwa is like
No, seclusion.
seclusion
Or
while
jalwa.
in a state of manifestation, while in a state of while in a state of manifestation. So being secluded, but at the same time being in a state of
Engagement. You're
engagement.
fully
Because
engaged.
jalwa is like, the word jalwa really means like you are, imagine like a football player in their prime showing off.
Yeah. Jalwa is like jalwa numa, jalwa gar.
Yeah, jalwa is not just like there he is, or there she is. Jalwa is that you are at the dawn.
Actually showing off. Yeah.
And it's like
You're on the center
are
stage.
the leader, and it's like what comes to mind is Erdogan. It's like he's like a dawn.
Jalwa.
Politics, like he's just like throwing people
Sorry,
aside.
I've got to go for a short ad break, Faisal, and inshallah, I'm going to continue with this concept in relation to the ayahs that we're discussing.
Radio Ramadan 365 Sound for the Soul.
Big Day Events, Scotland's biggest Asian caterers and event planners, specialists in full wedding packages with access to numerous venues from countryside retreats to 5-star hotels. From 100 to 1,000 guests, we can cater for your event without compromising in quality or service. Ensuring a successful and carefree event for you, call Big Day Events on 07 855 861 802 or visit us on bigdayservices.com.
Everybody made dua.
ये बच्चे भी स्कूल जा सकते हैं। गजाली एजुकेशन ट्रस्ट अपने 700 से ज्यादा स्कूलों में 1 लाख से ज्यादा बच्चों का मुस्तकबिल संवारने में कोशां है। आप चाहें तो आज के चिराग कल का सूरज बन सकते हैं, दुनिया रोशन कर सकते हैं।
इस रमजान अपने ज़कात व अतियात गजाली एजुकेशन ट्रस्ट को दीजिए।
ਜੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਜਾਂ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਕਿਸੇ ਜਾਣਨ ਵਾਲੇ ਨੂੰ ਟਾਈਪ 2 ਡਾਇਬੀਟੀਜ਼ ਦੀ ਤਸ਼ਖੀਸ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਜਾਂ ਟਾਈਪ 2 ਸ਼ੂਗਰ ਦੇ ਖਤਰੇ ਤੋਂ ਦੋਚਾਰ ਹੈ ਤੇ ਸਾਡੀ ਟੀਮ NHS ਗ੍ਰੇਟਰ ਗਲਾਸਗੋ ਐਂਡ ਕਲਾਈਡ ਵਿੱਚ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਮਜ਼ੀਦ ਸਿੱਖਣ ਤੇ ਨਾਲ ਆਪਣੀ ਸ਼ੂਗਰ ਨੂੰ ਕੰਟਰੋਲ ਕਰਨ ਵਿੱਚ ਮਦਦ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੀ ਹੈ। ਅਸੀਂ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਮੁxtਲਿਫ ਖਿਦਮਾਤ ਫਰਾਹਮ ਕਰਨੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਜ਼ਰੂਰਤ ਪੈਣ ਤੇ ਇੰਟਰਪ੍ਰੀਟਰ ਦੀ ਸਹੂਲਤ ਵੀ ਦੇ ਸਕਨੇ ਆ। ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਉਰਦੂ, ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਤੇ ਅਰਬੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਵਸਾਇਲ ਮੌਜੂਦ ਨੇ। ਮਜ਼ੀਦ ਜਾਣਨ ਲਈ ਸਾਡੀ ਵੈਬਸਾਈਟ www.nhsggc.scot/E2 diabetes hub ਜਾਂ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਕਾਲ ਕਰੋ 01415318901।
Radio Ramadan 365 Sound for the Soul. Radio Ramadan 365
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
In the name of Allah, the entirely merciful, the especially merciful.
اقرأ باسم ربك الذي خلق.
Recite in the name of your Lord who created.
خلق الإنسان من علق.
Created man from a clinging substance.
اقرأ وربك الأكرم.
Recite, and your Lord is the most generous.
الذي علم بالقلم.
Who taught by the pen.
علم الإنسان ما لم يعلم.
Taught man that which he knew not.
كلا إن الإنسان ليطغى.
No, but indeed man transgresses.
أن رآه استغنى.
Because he sees himself self-sufficient.
إن إلى ربك الرجعى.
Indeed, to your Lord is the return.
أرأيت الذي ينهى.
Have you seen the one who forbids?
عبدا إذا صلى.
a servant when he prays.
أرأيت إن كان على الهدى
Have you seen if he is upon guidance
أو أمر بالتقوى
or enjoins righteousness?
أرأيت إن كذب وتولى
Have you seen if he denies and turns away?
ألم يعلم بأن الله يرى
Does he not know that Allah sees?
كلا لئن لم ينته لنسفعا بالناصية
No, if he does not desist, we will surely drag him by the forelock.
ناصية كاذبة خاطئة
A lying, sinning forelock.
فليدع ناديه
Then let him call his associates.
سندع الزبانية
We will call the angels of hell.
Sadaqallahu al-Azim. So just before the break, Surah Alaq, we went into the concept of Ghar Hira, and I heard Sheikh saying that in remaining in that state of seclusion is like less than perfect. So that's something that you need to do something else, which is jalwa, which is engagement. And the real test is while we are in the full of life, we are in the center stage of life, engaging with everything, trying to tackle everything, trying to troubleshoot all the aspects of life, your family, your community life, your individual responsibilities, and yet you are with yourself and connected with God. Sheikh, is this something that would you say is a loyal understanding of what you say?
Yeah, it means as self-evident, I think, in terms of the seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. If you take even Mecca and Medina al-Nawara, you could say one is khalwa and one is jalwa. One, even though Mecca starts with seclusion, you can still say that the weakness of the community is still a type of khalwa. It's like it's still inward looking, it's still frail, and it's not imposing itself and its kind of worldview and spreading its worldview in a very aggressive manner, if you want to use that term. And Madinah Munawwara is the jalwa, is the Prophet ﷺ. And the jalwa reaches its perfection in khalwa, if you think of it. Because the Prophet when he enters Makkah al-Mukarramah, the conquest, al-Fath, that is al-jalwa. If you want jalwa, that's like the 10,000 or so army the Prophet came and brought, coming from different valleys into the city of Mecca. Even though Mecca is all these valleys and ravines, every direction, all these amazing military leaders are coming with the Prophet ﷺ, and the city is surrendering. That's jalwa. If you want to say where is jalwa, that's it. And so we look at the person who should be in a state of jalwa, it's the Prophet ﷺ. What is he doing? He's in such a state of humility that his physical demeanor is that his head, his blessed forehead has touched the saddle of his camel. Now, can you imagine that? Like, he's riding in, and his forelock is bowed in humility. That's khalwa. Like, we saw the states. We saw the descriptions of him, sallallahu. Like, okay, people said when the Prophet entered, he was like in this demeanor. But do you not think about the heart of the one who's in that situation, what he's thinking? Like, what do you think he's thinking about? He's thinking, oh, I need to find out where I used to live and get that back, and I need to take vengefulness on this person. I need to now send. He's connected to God. It's like almost he's like back in Ghar Hira. For me, he's back there because the power was his faith in Allah that was instilled with him. Wahaban. It was like given to him as a prophet. It's given, and that is that's like the holy grail of Islam. I think is to be totally engaged, but yet totally detached. And then, like Sayyidina Umar radiyallahu anhu, one of the descriptions that people used to say about him in his biographies is وَلَا يَخَافُ فِي اللَّهِ لَوْمَةَ لَائِمٍ, which is in the Quran as well. He never felt or feared the blame of anybody against him. Never felt. He didn't care about what people said about him. Because, in his state, he was in khalwa, And the Jalwa brings all this criticism. He was in this, the midst of a storm. But in the midst of a storm, his connection with Allah was such that he was tranquil. And that is, that's the aim of every believer, is that in the hurricane of your own lives, that you have this internal security and safety net, which is your faith in Allah, that is unshakable. I mean, that if you think of that as being something that you're coached in, for example, that is, people would sell everything to just get that internal strength, steel, which takes them through difficulties. And that's just something that I think is the holy, I would say the holy grail of Islam, is to achieve that. To achieve khalwa is a fall from perfection. To achieve jalwa is stupidity. Like, to achieve jalwa is just fakhr and ujab, and these are just all the spiritual diseases, coupled up in one place. If you like
but you need to remain in jalwa.
Yes, but
you can't escape. You have to.
Jalwa comes with all this poison. So
इकबाल says बराहीमी नजर पैदा मगर मुश्किल से होती है, हवस छुप छुप के सीनों में बना लेती है तस्वीरें, हवस छुप छुप के सीनों में बना लेती है तस्वीरें. So it's a difficult one. It's a very delicate line. The hadith of ostentation, riya, where there's like a black ant in a
so the a black ant on a smooth black stone in the midst of night.
Yeah.
And this, in fact, is Imam al-Ghazali, when he talks about in al-Maqasid, in Aqidah, he talks about God's knowledge, that God knows the black ant on a smooth black stone in the pitch depths of night. And scholars of Tasawwuf, they say that ujab creeps upon you like the dark ant on a dark black stone in the pitch darkness of night. So this is like, you cannot but help it. But if you pre-prepare the meal, which is sincerity, well before you go in, check your intention. As they say, check yourself before you wreck yourself. It's like a saying, but actually it's a very wise saying. Check your intention before you wreck your intention and your whole life. And so we have to thank Allah for this revelation, which is has such depth. Whichever this is why it just never fails to humble me. That I'm able to connect to such a tradition and to explain it, and other people are connected to it, and we just need to celebrate the connection of it, and without which we're nothing. Essentially, I wouldn't imagine anything else. And it's just life lessons, life hacks. You call it anything you want in modern day parlance. There's nothing that you can find as a frailty in our religious tradition. And there's nothing that you would say, well, if only this or if only that. This is some of the, this is what some of the companions used to say, that there was nothing in what the Prophet said when we said if only this or if only that was different, because everything was in this. Like the Quran says, وَكُلٌّ فِي فَلَكٍ يَسْبَحُونَ. Like the planets are swimming perfectly in their orbits. The teachings of Allah given to the Prophet ﷺ are perfectly balanced in this orbit of actual beauty, just complete beauty of a tradition. And I think sometimes we refuse to celebrate it enough, to give thanks to Allah for Islam. Because we're in it, we don't realize its powerfulness.
The blessing of it.
So the closeness of it. Yeah.
The closeness. The going back to two names in one ayah, Rabb and Khaliq, and then Khalaq al-insana min alaq. And the second ayah's connection with the first one. Created man. He is Rabb, and we understood the meaning of Rabb. He is the owner in its entirety, and then he created. And I also understood today that insan has uns. Because you are insan because you have uns for people around you.
Yeah, so there's something bothering me, that, because I remember there's actually three meanings for insan in Arabic, which I remember from
Nisyan, Insan.
Imam Feroz Abadi in his Basair in Tafsir, I remember so clear, I can almost see the page, but there's Uns and Nisyan. There's
Uns.
Inas, which is perception. Yeah, that's the third one. So insan is saying, yes, before I forget, talking about nisyan, is forget. Insan is forgetfulness. It's uns, which is sociability. Okay, and then inas, which is perception and understanding. And
that makes insan.
Yeah, because understanding, perception, insight, human beings have these capacities which are unique. In that coupling, that's insan, the human being, Homo sapien. And all of them are important because when Allah says to the Prophet ﷺ that we created human beings from a clot, to be a pure human being and a perfect human being, you have to embrace all these aspects. You have to embrace that you're going to be forgetful. And we have to embrace that other people will be forgetful or negligent or will take their eye off the ball. We have to engage in that as a community. We have to know that as a community, we only flourish when we stay together. And which is why the Prophet ﷺ said that yadullahi ma'al jama'a, that the supportive hand of God is with the people that are together. And the last thing, which is understanding, perception, knowledge, that we're a civilization and a people who build upon the shoulders of giants, build upon previous legacies, and we further our ability to understand things. But with that, so the only interesting is that insan, when it comes up in the Quran, there's so many situations where the insan is mentioned, and what is mentioned with it is that, خُلِقَ الْإِنسَانُ مِنْ عَجَلٍ, for example, that human beings are created out of haste or from haste, literally. Like we're just hasty animals. Like we just want everything at the same time. Like that tadarruj discussion. Yeah, hence the thing I kept telling you about tadarruj. In fact, straight after that, Allah says, سَأُرِيكُمْ آيَاتِ فَلَا تَسْتَعْجِلُونَ. When Allah says human beings are just created in haste, in other words, they have this, when they were created by Allah, He put this weakness within them that they need to fix to get the prize. Do you understand? It's like a puzzle. You have a Rubik's Cube. It's all mangled up. You get the prize if you fix it. So it's like al-ajal is placed within our existence as one of the things that we have to then unlock. You have to grapple with it. Allah is saying, فَلَا تَسْتَعْجِلُونَ. Don't make haste with me. Don't make me do things. Don't, like the Prophet asking Allah, if the Prophet had asked Allah to give him everything at the same time, that is isti'jal, is to be hasty. Allah says, don't be hasty.
I'm thinking we started this Ramadan with this concept that how Islamic civilization is shaped up by the concept of wahi. And I'm wondering if Islamic civilization or civilization with godly people, or people who are mindful of God and wahi, would ever allow the instant nature of the world today. Like you want it now, you get it now.
Wow, that's a good observation. So would they have? So this is what I said. I actually did say this, didn't I? Not about this.
Yeah,
the modern
Amazon Prime. Would Amazon Prime would have existed if a godly mind was on the helm of affair of technology?
Yeah. So this is the thing, because when I said about the criteria through which, I think I must have mentioned on this, or was it discussed somewhere else? This whole idea of vying for increased GDP, productivity, and without understanding purpose, without understanding sustainability, without understanding the effect on the environment, on people, on people's health, work-life balance, as they talk about now post-COVID. It's just COVID that made people realize there has to be such a thing as work-life balance. Understanding this whole addiction to instant gratification in everything, in knowledge as well. Like I'm talking about, it's not just that, it's about you want everything and you can't have everything. You have to go through to study grammar. You have to go through 6 different books step by step, and then you're just starting at the 6th book. You're starting to be able to understand the Quran with some depth. Like if you do Al-Mughni al-Labib, for example, the last kind of book that kind of studied with a teacher as a curriculum text, that's you starting on the process of being able to really deep dive into this kind of ocean of Arabic construction, which actually you don't understand why it's there until you get this very deep understanding of the grammar itself. So the thing that your question is actually very interesting, because would people want to, live their life in a situation where they're just progressing and they die? Like, what's the purpose of being on Mars? I think I must have mentioned at the beginning of this show or somewhere else.
Yeah,
like, what's the purpose of being there? And this is a big, I'm currently in Istanbul. The elections are about to take place, and I see lots of young people complaining about wanting iPhones. People saying, "Oh, if we had done X, Y, and Z, we'd be on Mars." And X, Y, and there's all these conceptions of this is what progress is. And I think Nobel Prize. I think that's where I mentioned it. Nobel Prize winners, like you're doing it, and you develop the atomic bomb, and you lead to, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Well done. Like, okay, so what do you want? Do you want a prize? Okay, you got a prize. Like, so this is a very deep, deep question, and and this is why one of the things is there's a book published in Princeton Press by who's it, Timur Kuran, which is all about essentially why Islam did not progress in the way that the West progressed. And he put it down to one thing, which was the contracts, modern commercial contracts, which allowed companies to be separated from individual owners. So in the past, if a company was built by a family, when the person passed away who owned it, it'd be broken up. And then other people would be able to then rise, and then it would just be trickle down to everybody. Like, inheritance would mean that everybody gets a portion, and then everyone starts again. So one of the sons might be good and he might build it up again. But what modern financial contracts allowed people to do is to create non-personal entities which can grow and grow and grow, and they become McDonald's, they become Coca-Cola, they become the Apple, they become Google. In other words, they grow and they consume, and they basically create monopolies. And the problems in the world in terms of the conglomeration of wealth is all due to that.
Yeah.
Even individuals.
It's a big issue for the governments. They're more powerful.
It's an issue for government. It's a big issue for you and me. It's a big issue for people that are struggling to make, crisis of living. There's enough food on earth, but it's a question of, it's not even redistribution. We're talking about, in Islamic law, this would, I would not have a guess. It's haram to have the type of monopoly systems, contractual systems, which leverage power in not even individuals, it's actually entities, which is really, I think if you think about it, is really strange that this company is so rich and it leverages this to basically dictate how people live. And this is why, this whole thing of ajal, this whole thing of haste, people wanting things right away. Would we have, Amazon if we knew the effect that has on people that work for it, and the distributors and the people that produce the content, and the monopolization of, it's a question to be had. This is put it that way. It's something that needs to be thought about. But I think our understanding of success wouldn't be how many companies do we have in the NASDAQ 500, for example, or kind of.
It's almost like I don't know if I can use the term. There's a satanic mind has preyed upon the weakness, the things which Quran tells us not to have, and that part of the psychology is being preyed upon. You want something now, you get it. You want something big, you will get it. You want to be filthy rich and not knowing what to do with it, you can have it. And the whole system is built around that. The whole civilization is built around that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you can, Islamic civilization, the Prophet civilization that he built and the companions, the Salaf built, didn't have any artifacts. Just let that sink in. No lovely vases, no art, no significant architecture until the time of, Abdul Malik ibn Marwan, for example, the Umayyad period, and after 100 years. Like, nothing, they didn't want to leave anything that was substantial. They wanted to leave, it's like a bit of a cliche, like they wanted to leave the world with a substantial sahifa, a book of actions, good actions, and live a good life, eat food that was healthy, go to your grave content that you've done, you lived an ethical life, the good life, let's just say, which meant sometimes fighting wars, it meant doing ghazawat, it meant all that stuff which is worldly, but not for the sake of acquiring, but for the sake of liberation. Sayyidina Umar, when he arrived in Egypt, he said, متى استعبدتكم الرجال وقد ولدتكم أمهاتكم أحرارا. He looked at people enslaved, in bondage, and he says, since when have you been enslaved, when God created you and allowed your mothers to give you birth while you're in a state of freedom? That was it. His message was, what are you doing? Why is slaves to each other? Why are you oppressing each other? That's his purpose. The reason of Jalwa for Sayyidina Umar was that, to give the message of that, not to then, have a massive palace where he would live. And when he entered Jerusalem, it's famous that he entered like the Prophet entered Mecca. And they were looking around to see where's the leader of the Muslims, and he was on a donkey. And they were thinking how his legs were straddling the ground because he's so tall. There's a sense of humility here that I think our civilization has, but with this jalwa, with this sense that if, our khulafa in the past did have to, build massive buildings, it was to show the people that were at war with them that they have everything they have and more. It's like, Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, he was asked by, it was somebody from a Jewish community. They said, in Sayyidina Ibn Hajar was on this, he's a major hadith scholar. He was on this beautiful horse in Qahira, Cairo, and there was this person, kind of very poor Jewish person saying, aren't you the person that claims that your prophet, he was claiming the Prophet ﷺ, that he says that, this world is a prison for believers and, wajanatul kafir, and that paradise will be a prison for disbelievers. And he said, yes. He said, because regardless of what opulence I have now, it's nothing compared to what I have in the hereafter. So it's just, he's there to show the mansab of in the past, scholars used to have a special seat where they used to teach. It wasn't because they weren't humble. It was because the Khalifa said, you have to show people that knowledge is over everything. And even in Ottoman Empire, that the scholars, they used to wear, some of the scholarly class used to wear blue sandals to show that they're walking on the sky, like they're the highest. It was to indicate that they are the most elevated people, because their status is like the people that are essentially representing the heavenly realm. And that is the hierarchy.
And why would they not feel? Because Iqra bismi rabbika, recite.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So
recite in the name of your Lord, they created.
Yeah, so this is amazing, organic. Islamic culture is just so rich. That, you look at architecture, you look at meaning, you look at structure. It just becomes mind-bogglingly amazing. And
we
it all
finish
comes
off
from
this
Iqra.
episode today with the last bit. Iqra wa rabbukal akram.
Yeah, and Muhammad, because it's to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasallam, Iqra. In other words, it's like, after this harshness of the initial process of revelation with the angel Jibreel, Allah said to give this tasalli, which is going to be the whole theme of this next couple of verses. Iqra wa rabbukal akram. Read, because this is what you need to know. Your Lord is Akram, Kareem, will nourish you. Now, in this state, the Prophet is fearful of his own life. He's fearful of this entity coming and squeezing him and asking him to read and recite. At that point, Allah is saying, look, it's like I said, Allah ascended upon the throne of the Day of Judgment as the merciful. Allah is saying, look, the one that's asking you to teach is not the vengeful, is not the stern teacher. It is Al-Akram. And guess what? Alladhi allama bil qalam is the one that is going to, as we know, will start to unravel knowledge through the qalam, the divine pen, teaching the human being what he did not know. And it's all of a sudden, the karam is in that. Allama bil qalam, allama al insana ma lam ya'lam. That karam, that generosity, is teaching people what they did not know. That is like, if you want to know the vista, this amazing scene that will be in front of you, it will be unending. And this is going to be the story of the Prophet ﷺ at the end of his life, giving khutbah for hour after hour on everything that Allah has unveiled to him of the unseen. Like at the time of the passing away of the Prophet ﷺ, he'd given everything that the qalam could invest in a human being. So Iqra is just like this singularity that explodes into generosity.
That's all the time we have for today's episode. Inshallah, back with Sheikh Rizwan in 2 days' time. Reflections will be on tomorrow and day after. With Sheikh Rizwan, we'll be back on Wednesday, inshallah. Up until then, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.